Hello and welcome to Identity 2024. My name is Mathieu Roche and I'm the co-founder and CEO of ID5. The countdown to the full deprecation of third-party cookie is well and truly underway. 2024 will be a pivotal year for the digital advertising industry. Google will be switching off third-party cookies for about 1% of Chrome users as soon as next month, and will go through a broader phase-out for all users later in the year. It's therefore more important than ever for you to have an all-rounded omni-channel identity strategy in place. In the recent State of Digital Identity report that we published just a few weeks ago, and that you can access on our website, 55% of respondents told us that the deprecation of cookies was a good thing because they were not a good enough system to recognize people in the first place. However, less than half of them also said being very confident about their long-term prospect to address and measure advertising. And even when we replace cookies in browsers, there will be broader identity challenges to address in the years to come, with, for example, 53% of our respondents believing that the current identification system in CTV is inefficient. To guide you on this journey away from cookies and other legacy identifiers and into a better world, more efficient and more respectful of users and publishers' data, we've brought together over 20 experts from across the industry to provide fresh perspectives and discuss strategies that will help you prepare for the road ahead. To start the event, I'll be speaking with Bob Lord, SVP at IBM, about his extensive experience in the digital advertising space and how AI has the potential to propel the industry forward. We'll then have a panel with Tom Triscari of Lemonade Project, Ian Whitaker of Liberty Sky Advisors, and Joanna O'Connell of R3 to discuss the economics of programmatic and how they are evolving as advances in identity-based buying continue. After that, we'll be looking beyond the cookie and beyond the browser with Rob Leon of Vizio, Jonathan Thornton of Frameplay, Valerie Reimer of iHeartMedia, and Shubneez Khan of InMobi. They will explain how the challenges they face to recognize users in audio, gaming, TV, and mobile channels, and how they're approaching new identity solutions. We'll then adopt a forward-looking approach in our panel Identity in Tomorrow's World. The post-cookie discussion has been very focused on targeting, but there are many other use cases that identity supports, and we'll discuss them with Sarah Robertson of Experian UK, Phil Schrader of GumGum, Evan Hovorka of Albertsons, and Vlad Stezin of Optimal. Next, I'll be back with a panel of data protection experts, including Tony Katzer of the ID Tech Lab, Lisa Abusali of Neutronian, Linda Tielova of OneTrust, and Ariel Garcia of ASG Solutions. They'll provide insights into best practices and will offer the perspective on how we can achieve standardization in privacy. Finally, we'll hear real-world examples of how universal IDs are already providing value for advertisers and publishers, with Jamie Nash of The Trade Desk, Guillaume Balin of Equative, Nicolas Boucher of Havas Media Network, and Greg Gilletta of TransUnion. As you can see, we've put together a lot of very educational, very thoughtful, and hopefully quite entertaining content. If you're not able to watch the entire event today, it will be made available on demand on our website in the coming days. I would like to extend a huge thank you to all of the speakers who are joining us today, as well as to all of you for watching. I hope that Identity 2024 will help you prepare for the year ahead. Enjoy the show, and thank you for watching. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Identity 2024. I am Mathieu Roche, the CEO of ID5, and I am super excited to have my guest here with me, Bob Lord, SVP at IBM.
Hey, Mathieu, how are you? Thanks for having me.
It is great to have you. So, Bob needs no introduction. I'm sure everyone here knows who you are. You're, nothing less than a legend in the digital advertising space. But you started your career, the digital advertising career, in 2000 at Razorfish. Which was one of the early kind of agency operators in the agency space, got a very kind of long string of acquisition, went through Microsoft, then went through Publicis. You went on to lead Publicis' digital arm as the CEO of Vivaki Interactive, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
So a long stint on the agency side, then you went to AOL, joined Tim Armstrong as president of AOL in 2013, oversaw the sale to Verizon, And in 2016, you joined IBM as Chief Digital Officer, so one of the largest brands, largest advertiser in the world. And since then, you've moved back to the sell side and joined Weather Channel. So you've seen every single side, you've seen the industry from every single angle, right?
Yeah, no, and actually, it's interesting when you really, if you reflect back on 25 years or so that I've been doing this and been in and out of this industry, this intersection of marketing and technology and media is, I still think, just actually really coming to fruition. A lot of the ideas that we had back at Razorfish, and then therefore in the media marketplace and when we're at Viviki Interactive, about using data more effectively to actually create great consumer brand value creation. I think with the advent of what's happening now with AI and large language models, we're actually going to be able to do this and manage identity in ways that we have not been able to do, to the benefit of brands. Maybe not to the ad tech industry at large, but to the benefit of brands and consumers. So I'm actually seeing sort of almost like a revival of what's happened over the years, and very excited about it.
So we've only scratched the surface, effectively, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
It feels like a big scratching. A lot has happened.
Yeah, no, a lot has, and it's been a very short time. I mean, even if you and I attended the Luma conference, and there was a slide that I thought actually captured it fairly well. Maybe you just throw that up a bit.
Let me
But
share it.
if you go back in time and you really think about the dot-com boom, that was really when those digital agencies were really starting to perform. But more importantly, there were technology companies that were being established, specifically in Amazon and a Google and a Salesforce, that were really giving great application utilities on cloud-based services like never before. So instead of actually building custom applications, brands and consumers could actually use technology in ways that were not very expensive, but actually really, really great utility. And then we moved into the Web 2.0 area, where we really got into a lot of social media, then into the sharing economy, which I think really fundamentally changed people's perception about how technology could help them in their everyday life. If you just think about Uber and getting a cab, I mean, it's actually revolutionized how you commute in New York today, or actually how you rent, sharing space with Airbnb. Pretty phenomenal, just to take the pain out of a consumer's journey around this. Then we started to dabble with Web 3.0, but actually, I really believe that the fundamental shift here is around what we're actually in the middle of right now, or just in the first inning of it, is around the AI technologies and what's happening. ChatGPT, I think, opened up a world of democratization to access to large language models. Yes, with lots of flaws still, I would suggest to you, but it's only getting better and better. So I think when we think about identity and we think about data management and we think about how a brand consumer communicates with its consumer, AI is going to have a major fundamental impact on everything we do, which I think is exciting. And quite honestly, Mathieu, and you and I have talked about this, if you're a company that has a very unique data set, you will win here. It's not necessarily about the technology as it much more is about the data set itself. Can that data set allow you to have interesting insight into your consumer? And if you have that data set, you can augment it with other privacy forward data like the weather company, which I'm sure we'll talk about weather data. And that will give you as a brand insight to consumer behavior that you may have not had before by only using past history like cookies. Yeah. So I think we're in a really, really interesting space right now. And if you think,
I want to talk about AI, and you have a unique point of view, right? With I mean, IBM was doing AI before it was even a buzzword, right? With Watson and everything. So I want to get into this, but this is more like forward looking. I want to talk about the as you said, the past 20 years, right? Because we've seen all of those logos on those slides. I mean, those companies, they're not even 20 years old, and they've revolutionized our world, but they've also revolutionized the way brands engage with their customers.
Right.
And that dynamic has really shifted, right? When we entered the 20th century, it was like TV and big media agency, oldcos were really kind of the owners of this space, right? And then we've seen a lot of kind of back and forth between kind of with programmatic, a lot of the power shift went to brands, and all of a sudden, brand had access to data with like retargeting and the ability to kind of find their customers wherever they were, which has led to like arguably loss of power from the sell side, right? More commoditization of inventory supply. And now it feels like the pendulum is shifting back to the sell side with less cookies, less access to data, more restrictions, right? So we're seeing kind of more kind of power back to, and also with TV, broadcasters kind of have retained a lot of the power. So we're seeing that. How have you lived through this? Because you've been buy side, sell side. Like, what's your analysis on this? What's your take on this? Do you agree with my characterization of it?
Yeah, no. Well, look, I think it's going to be it. I think the power shift is going to be back to where you're going to attract the eyeballs and where are the eyeballs going to be. So the sell side gets a lot more power because they become the place that's attracting sort of the consumer base.
Yeah.
And I think when the demand, sort of power was coming, it was because you were giving insight to the brands, and having them sort of understand that piece of the demand better. But now, from a sell standpoint, I do think that the shift is going to happen. How fast it'll happen, I think, is still a question. But it is, if you go back to even just social media, right? Social media was really the big moment of time where the consumer got a voice. And that was a pivotal moment at this point. And I guess I wonder, as we go from the sharing economy into sort of more of this AI conversation, who will start to get the power again? I believe that if brands are smart and they use their data effectively, they will still continue to control the power. It will actually give them their competitive advantage. So if you just think about the Wall Street Journal as an example, or the New York Times, whatever that may be, they know a lot about you and I, Matthew, of what articles I look at, how I look at it, right? But they're still in their own ecosystem. They haven't really taken that data out beyond that ecosystem itself. They were actually to take that data insight and they were actually to partner with a brand more explicitly and augment others' data that influences consumer targeting. They could actually really have a very, very strong data business, or even partner with a company like you and get other identity management into their ecosystem. There's a lot that can happen when you have the power of unique data to begin with. You then can start augmenting it, and you can actually have more power than you used to have before. And I think they yielded it in the past.
I agree in principle. I think there's been a lot of fear on the sell side with this being open, being like trying to be aggressive, or like you to expand because there's been a lot of data leakage. There's been a lot of losses, right? Like a lot of their assets. And when we talk about AI, and we'll get into this in a minute, but you and I were talking about the infamous Elon Musk interview that just earlier this week. Basically, he said, yes, AI is trained on data that is kind of copyrighted, but like by the time those lawsuits are settled, like all of the publishers will be dead anyway. So like it's a lost battle. So there still is this kind of this like, yes, they've got great data, but how do they leverage it in a protected manner without being basically stolen at gunpoint?
Yeah.
Like that dynamic is difficult from a publisher standpoint. Like there is this kind of this tendency to like actually close down and kind of, almost like regroup on your own self from a protection standpoint.
I know, but this is the problem. So I think you're right, but let's go back in history again. When the distribution platforms were looking for content, that was really the moment that these publishing platforms should have said, you know what, I'm not giving you free distribution of New York Times articles. They should have put a line in the sand then, right? Now, when you actually sort of eliminate the idea that cookies are going to go away and cookie deprecations and third-party identifiers are not going to be available, you now have the power again. You finally start to have the power of Matthew's first-party data on my site. And you have to start to insist that you actually have a data strategy that you'll share with people, but you're going to monetize it appropriately and you're going to control that data asset. You're going to have control of that data asset. And I think that is the moment in time. And this is a difference of taking back the power that the content folks should have had over all of these years. And, look, at the time, no one really knew what it meant for digital distribution, right? It was a small little thing, but now what do we have? Over $3 trillion being sort of executed through digital channels for marketing that's associated next to content. I mean, $3 trillion, it's an amazing amount of money. But when we first at AOL were setting up our first programmatic platform called AOL One, nobody had any of these things connected, right? And you were actually faxing. It's very hard to even conceive of because it wasn't that long ago. It was only 10 years ago. But we were faxing IOs, and we were, getting receipts back, and we were getting confirmations by email. It was nothing was automated. So the ad tech industry has really revolutionized how we actually communicate. But the fact of the matter is, the guys who own the content and own the data on me really should have the power.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we talk about cookieless as a challenge. I think it is a formidable opportunity for publishers, for data owners, because cookies are a massive data leakage liability, right? They are, by definition, they are accessible to third parties. And so everybody and anybody can have access to your audience, can know what's happening on your site, on your apps, and basically use that intelligence without asking for permission. So it's a big liability for people's data, personal data from the people, but it's also a massive liability for publishers. And I think one of the reasons why the pendulum is shifting back to publishers is that they will be able to regain control and decide who they want to share data with, how they want to share data, and not going to be effectively robbed at gunpoint by people who are just have access to that data without any control.
And I do think, look, I really believe that the publishers have to come up with a comprehensive data strategy. And they have to fundamentally understand that. And I was with one publisher last week, and it was like the light bulb went off in the CEO's mind of like, oh my God, I really need to get my data strategy together. So I'm not sure it's at the forefront yet. And they're still, pining about, giving content out and how they monetize content, or how do they grow their subscription models, right? Because that's the other alternative to go, right? Is you get a lot of subscribers, and a lot of these brands can get more subscribers. But there is a explicit data strategy that they need to take on, where their ownership, and they put value around that data. And that's what brands are going to love. Because if they can actually then figure out who the consumer is at an aggregate level and create a great value exchange, they're going to win. And that means you're not going broad reach anymore. You're going to go more targeted. And I think that is, it's interesting, brands want to associate themselves. I mean, all this kerfuffle about X and Twitter, right, is all about brands don't want to be associated with content that they don't like, right? And that's an obvious thing. Every brand has always tried to protect their brand over time. And if you're associated with content that doesn't uplift your brand or is synonymous with your brand, however you want to think about it, you're going to pull from that platform. And I think the advertising industry and the brands should have the choice to do that. But the only way they're going to do that is if they get very, very clear on what data they want to be, publishers they want to be associated with, and how they want to share their data with those publishers.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there is still, in many, many conversations, this notion that publishers are just here to produce volume of eyeballs, volume of page views, without thinking about the data component.
Yes.
A user that consents to be identified and to be recognized when they come back, and to kind of give you some information about them, who they are and what their household looks like and everything, is a lot more valuable. It is actually the only valuable user than you have, because someone who comes in, doesn't consent to be identified, doesn't share anything, like, why would you give them access to your content free of charge, right? You're not going to make any money off of them. And so that mental model hasn't kind of, become the norm yet. You still have a lot of like, let's do volume, let's have more page views. But for what? If you're not going to monetize them because you can't identify it, you can't qualify them, what's the point?
It is interesting. I mean, I do think, you're a startup. I think you think about these things a lot more.
Way too much, probably.
Because you're a startup brand. Even like, let's say, an Away suitcase, or Star Airbuds and stuff. Like, they think about where they spend their marketing dollars versus getting reach. When you get into these very large marketing agencies and these very large marketing departments, it's all about reach. And I think reach is a misnomer of where we are right now and where the eyeballs are, unless it's a live sports event. I mean, I think still live sports has a lot of cachet, but that's, they're going to be far and few between going forward.
But it's probably easier to monetize live sport as a broadcaster, as a media owner, just because of the quality of the content, than it is to monetize I mean, you've been at the Weather Channel for the past, what, 2-3 years now?
Yeah, 2 or 3.
And so monetizing content, right? It's a value exchange, right? The reason why people can check the weather forecast free of charge is because advertisers are paying for their visit and for the forecasting and the technical cost involved into kind of providing that content. So there has to be a value exchange, and it's been implicit for a long time. But when it's implicit, it's like it doesn't exist, and then when people start to find a way to kind of, leave without paying for their meal, right? There's no such thing as a free meal. It doesn't work. So you have to have a more explicit value exchange.
It is interesting. So when we first got it, so IBM has owned the weather company now for about 7.5 years, and we just recently sold it to Francisco Partners. But when we started to really revive the consumer part of the business, it was an advertising strategy, but we also did a subscription strategy because there was a lot of debate within IBM of understanding, are we actually getting the data right? Do we need first party data? They were uncomfortable with what you and I would just consider as just sort of a media play. So we actually popped up a subscription business, and literally within 7 months, we had over 1 million subscribers. It was $19, I think, a month or whatever it was at the time. But the interesting lesson for me in that was the weather opportunity and the weather publishing property is a utility. It's something that people come back to over and over and over again. Unlike, a Huffington Post or a TechCrunch, where it's kind of optional to go get the content. You're kind of like, but every day somebody gets up and they check the weather and they get eyeballs. So having data and having content that is much more utility. Like if you think about like a Yahoo Finance or something like that, it's a utility. People go and they check their stock market. So having those kinds of assets to attract eyeballs, it's really, really interesting. And I think then brings up the question of, can you go, a subscriber is worth, I think, 3 times, to the weather company versus a non-subscriber, right? Because they're
so the subscription revenue, separate from the advertising revenue, right? So if you just consider just the subscription versus the advertising revenue on a user, it's 3x higher.
3x higher, and it's because, well, we don't serve ads to that subscriber. They get extra features. There's a lot of things that come along with that too, right? So they're getting extra value, but to the company itself, it's much more valuable because now I'm not dependent on the eyeball showing up that morning to check the weather for the advertiser. So it is an interesting, I think, as we move into this new world, it's going to be about giving people consumer choice. And then it's going to be about, how you actually use as a publisher property, how do you use your first party data to augment it, to make it more effective for a brand.
Let's shift gear and talk about AI. There's another slide that we saw from this conference that we were at in the Luma conference in Palo Alto. That's the slide, right? And we should give credit to Jeremiah. Well, actually, this slide is from another guy, but that was an amazing presentation he gave us. I think the parallel between industrial revolution.
Actually, Mathieu, I was blown away on 2 things that he said, just so the audience can hear this. Number one, he has spent the last 6 months at AI hackathons around Silicon Valley. And he said there's about 100 of them that happen on a monthly basis there. And they get together on Saturdays and Sundays and basically work on developing AI agents, which I was kind of like, I understood there were hackathons going on, but I didn't understand the volume,
the scale
of activity and the scale that's happening just on an ongoing routine basis. And he's been sitting in a lot of these AI forums, the AI agent forums. And then this slide, which I think sort of flipped my head upside down about the difference of, replacing muscle power with mechanical power in the Industrial Revolution. And when you think about the AI revolution, it's augmenting brain power. And I'm not at the point yet where I believe it's replacing, but I do think in the next decade, it will definitely be augmenting our brain power
So
on an ongoing basis.
it's interesting, Chris. He says replacing / augmenting. The politically correct view, the glass half full view is augmenting.
Yeah.
The glass half empty view is replacing.
I know.
And there is a case. I mean, you know, there's obviously a lot of cases to be made against for and against artificial intelligence. But with the Industrial Revolution, we went from an industrial society to a service-oriented society, right?
Right.
And we went to like secondary jobs to tertiary jobs. There is no force pillar, right? Like what is next after service? If we start remove service oriented jobs, like what is next? And I was listening to I don't know if you listened to this interview, the podcast from Pivot. They had an interview with Barack Obama. Barack Obama a few days ago, and they were talking about the, you know, what we need to do in an AI world, right? Where are kind of people's job going to be, and where is kind of the people value? And he was talking about nurses and kind of social care and you know human relationship jobs that cannot be out. So maybe this is the new sector, right? That jobs are going to be focusing on. But let's talk about augmenting first, and let's talk about your experience with AI.
Because, we can talk about both. But actually, and I'll give a plug for the Pivot podcast too. I think Kara and Scott Galloway do a really, really nice job with that podcast.
When will you be on?
I don't know. I don't think I'll be on yet, but I think it's pretty phenomenal. It's just a great banter, and I think they bring up the news issues really, really well. So both really talented people. But I do, you know, to your question, I do think that we are going to be tackling bigger and bigger problems as a society and as businesses that we've never done before. Whether it's the volume of data that we have to crunch, it's sort of try to get insight. And this is where I think the computing power on the accessibility of large language models is really going to help us. So if I sort of take the elementary thing of when we built our programmatic platform at AOL, you know, that was all, you know, logical models that we put together, that we built. It was machine learning. It was, you know, it did the things it was supposed to do. It was offloading all of those faxes and all those spreadsheets that people would go after. But this is a whole different level where all of the machines will help us think through options of how we actually should do things. And the most important piece is the explainability about how the machine is actually making the decisions. That's what's going to get people very comfortable about this. And I think it's incumbent upon everyone who's working in these large language models is to tell people what that's about. How did the machine make the decision that the media plan should go this direction? Not just execute on that. So the level of thinking that we have to have as humans to understand how the machine is making those decisions is a job that we don't know yet. It's a job that we all have to take on, and it's a responsibility that we have to take on. Because if we can't understand how the machine is making the decisions or how it's made the decisions based on the biased data that came in, therefore it's recalibrating how the biased data is getting in, that is a major problem over time, which could get to its own decision making. But I think our jobs as humans is to take the input that these machines give us and then make educated decisions about what we should or shouldn't do. And it'll be a higher level of thinking for us as a human species.
Is it the direction of travel though? Because when you look at like the early applications of artificial intelligence in digital advertising, right? A few examples come to mind, but Google's was it a Performance Max platform, right? Is one that is kind of arguably, right, AI powered, massive black box, right? Huge black box. When you think about what, again, Google is doing with the privacy sandbox, right? Big black box on how this is, you know, how you qualify customers, how you identify customers' behavior. I mean, maybe with Watson, you have a different kind of point of view, but the notion of tracing the reasons for the decisions that are made by a machine are I agree with you, they're super critical. Does it sound like the direction of travel though, or are we kind of handing over control to the machine and just taking whatever they tell us for granted?
Well, look, I think, so IBM's point of view on this is very, very clear, right? We talk about actually creating technology that helps you understand how the machine has made the decision. Okay, it's called Watson X. It's part of our program around understanding the governance around how the machine is making the decision. Okay, and there's 3 different phases that we work with our clients on. And IBM is very focused on helping enterprises only understand that, right? It's not a consumer play.
Yeah.
Now, I would argue to you that the tools that Google's putting together, they know how that machine is making the decisions. You know, they're using it as
not
a
telling us.
competitive advantage
Yeah.
not to tell the customer how those segments came up. That's a business decision more than it is actually, because you have to fundamentally, if they're going to have an impact, you're going to have to understand how those decisions are made, because you're going to want to pull those levers a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. It's with the work we started to do at the weather company, we started to go down this path of the digital execution around, I don't know if you're in a QSR or you're McDonald's, Burger King, whoever it may be, right? The machine will optimize down to a particular conversion rate. Let's say it's driving somebody to a McDonald's in a very underprivileged area. And the machine will tell you that that's the way to go. And that going to another, you know, higher income area that has a McDonald's in it, and maybe they have other choices for food, that's not the place to go. If you actually dig underneath that a little bit more, the actual sale in the higher income area is better for McDonald's and more profitable for McDonald's. Like that family will go out and buy 5 Happy Meals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or in the underprivileged area, they'll only go after and they'll buy 1 Happy Meal, and they may split it between 2 kids, right? So the fact of the matter is the machine's only going to do so much for us. If you understood why the machine was sub-optimizing down to a food desert, you can actually break that apart, and you can give the machine more information and say, no, I only want 25% of my money to go there, because actually my profitability is higher over here, and I want 75% of the money to go that way. And that's the kind of thing that we have to check on. We have to understand the decisions that are being made there.
So let's get back to that dynamic between buyers and sellers, right? I think arguably that technical expertise has been really concentrated in the middle, right? Whereby a lot of the buyers and the sellers have kind of outsourced their advertising, digital advertising capabilities to agencies, programmatic agencies, trading desks on the buy side, and monetizers, right? The Googles and the Facebook and the Amazon on the sell side to kind of make it happen for them. What would it take for them to kind of rebuild those capabilities and kind of become more savvy at understanding this? Because as you said, if you don't understand, you can't optimize, you can't really own this. So are we at a stage where everybody's becoming kind of better, or
No, yeah.
Like, I see you smile there. What?
I'm gonna give you a snarky comment, and you can call it an Elon Musk comment or whatever, but I just think people are lazy. No, I do honestly believe people are lazy, and we're still lazy today, because if we have $100, what are we gonna do? We're gonna go spend it on where the eyeballs are. We're gonna give it to Facebook. We're gonna give it to YouTube. We're gonna basically spend the money there, and we're not gonna get really, really good at our marketing craft. In this new world of AI, it's going to take more energy and more sophistication from the brand marketers, not the agencies and not the ad tech companies, about knowing their consumer much better than they currently know them today, and know that ice cream sales go up, during the winter than they do during the summer, and understanding where that is and what part of the world and how that works, and actually getting very directive about where they want to spend their dollars. Now, look, I think Procter & Gamble, Unilever, those guys are really sophisticated about that, but that's not the norm. That is not the norm of what happens going forward. And we're going to have to, it's going to be incumbent upon those marketers to get smarter about the data, get smarter about their consumer, so that they can have a real value exchange and have them differentiate. I mean, we all, it's easy to do when you're a premium brand, because you have high margins. It's harder to do when you have to democratize, sort of life across all brands. And that's what's going to have to happen in order for you to be fantastic. Away Suitcases, which I think maybe most people will know that brand, and that came out of nowhere. But that's because they actually had a great product. They had a great online marketing program and they undercut most suitcases. But more importantly, their service delivery and understanding what product you got, how to upsell you, expanded. I don't know, everybody in my family has 2 or 3 of them now. And that's only because of direct marketing that they came after us and how they upsold us. Yep. It's classic. What digital and AI allows you to do is to know your consumer at levels in ways that you normally wouldn't. And you cannot at this point offload it to somebody else and say, go do my marketing anymore. You've got to understand whether it's your B2B customer or your B2C customer much better.
And that's the big difference with the D2C brands, like a way that you mentioned. It's like they own the relationship, they own the data, they really understand it. They're not lazy, as you say, and just like outsource something to someone else, and they're just going to really try to own it. And it's no surprise that we've seen the rise of those D2C brands over the past 10 years or so.
Think about the gift now that CMOs and the marketing managers have with AI agents, right? Instead of going and doing search and doing all the analysis on your own, you can go and start talking to an AI agent about what you want to do with marketing, obviously within the constraints that your company allows you to do it.
Yeah.
But you're going to get a wealth of information from these AI agents in ways to think about marketing in a different way. It's no longer looking up in a textbook and going after the 4 Ps. This is like, how did all brands launch their brand and get information back? How did Peloton launch itself? Yeah. How did Uber get such entrenchment in the market? And these AI agents will come back to you and give you research reports and other things like that should give you so much fundamental basis of information to make a decision around your brand that we didn't have access to before. And that's only going to get better. Yeah. So when everyone's get worried about their job, yes, if you are writing a check to an agency and offloading, you don't have a job anymore. Yeah. But if you actually start to do research and really understand what the world is about and where we're going, the whole world is going to change. And the question is, how do you embrace sort of this information set, this input to actually make yourself a better marketer overall and not violate identity of your consumer? I mean, that's a whole nother topic for us to talk, right? But there's a line there.
But isn't it connected though? And I'm conscious of time, so we're not going to start down the new rabbit hole here. But isn't it connected though? Isn't it because a lot of brands, a lot of publishers have kind of abandoned the relationship with their customers to third parties, that those relationships have been abused, right? When you think about like, no one in their own mind who cares about their brand, like most brands do, would retarget their visitors 50 times a day, right? It just happened because it was outsourced to someone who benefited from no capping and just like, let's cookie bomb the hell of those users and we'll benefit from it. So the fact that brands and publishers have a chance to kind of regain control over the relationship, those abuses of personal data, those kind of very intrusive, very aggressive practices will naturally go away, right? Especially if the infrastructure we leverage is safer.
Yeah, no, that's actually a very good point. It is interesting because if you really think about what happened sort of in the social media world, right? And, consumers got their voice. We're going to start to see a power shift here as humans start to rely on AI agents a bit more to get their work done and make decisions. Brands are going to have to figure out how they integrate in with those AI agents to help to inform folks. I mean, we saw the demo, I think at the Luma conference too, where you were walking along and you just asked your AI agent, hey, I'm thinking about buying an SUV, and it came back and recommended SUVs based on reports. But how you integrate in as a brand on that is going to be very interesting. So as a marketer, fundamentally understanding what these AI agents do, how they make recommendations, the explainability of it, how you integrate in, is a whole craft that we've just started to explore.
Yeah,
that's fun.
All right, it's going to be fun. We're unfortunately at time. I want to ask you, pivot style, right? What are your predictions? Let's do Scott Galloway predictions for next year. I know I hope you're not going to be thinking only about digital advertising, because I know you're retiring in a few months, and I hope you'll take a lot of time to go cycling and run triathlon maybe as well.
And we're gonna go do some traveling, but I'll be around for sure and engaged.
So what are you looking forward to? What do you think 2024 is going to look like?
At 2024, look, I think people are going to digest this idea that AI is a consequential technology in general. Like, I think what you and I experienced, a month or two ago, it's going to dawn on everybody that, oh my God, I got to learn more about this and I'm going to embrace it. People are scared of it still. So we've got to get through that. Oh, it's sort of like, don't worry about it. I don't want to worry about it. So I do think that marketers and agencies are going to embrace this. And it's going to start out pretty elementary, which is almost like a Q&A kind of thing on top of databases. But I do think that that's going to be a big thing. I do think that this fundamental power shift is going to happen, which we were just talking about, where the consumer is going to start relying on AI agents, whether they know it or not, through their phones or whatever. And that is going to make brands question, well, if they're relying on it, I'm not going to be on Google search anymore. I'm going to want to be on, one of these AI agents, and how do I integrate my message in there, which is not intrusive? So that's going to be interesting. And then I think, business and brands are going to need to use, as we've talked a lot about, is their own unique identity data, and they're going to have to figure out how to utilize that with I would call it privacy forward identifiers. They can actually create value exchange with consumers. And I think it'll be interesting at CES to see who's, talking about this, which I know you are, and how you move forward on that. But there are some progressive agencies that are really pushing this agenda. As the cookie deprecates, it's going to be, almost overnight, and brands are going to be searching for a volume answer. And I think companies that talk about that it's going to be good. So I think 24 is going to be a sort of a defining what the new world will look like for this industry.
Pivotal year. No, I just want to thank you. Like, it's always great to spend time with you. We got a chance to share with a few hundred people today, so that's even better. But I thank you very much for doing that. It was a great conversation. Looking forward to a great 24, as you said. There's no shortage of exciting things ahead of us. In the meantime, thank you very much for your time, and for our listeners and our watchers, enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you again, Bob.
Great. Thanks, Mathieu, for having me.